Songs of Praise comes to Southport on BBC One Wales. Join Pam Rhodes by the seaside in 25 minutes. This is BBC One Wales. Now the news with Sian Williams.
Anger from rail consumer groups over plans to change some ticket sales. Passengers at small stations may not be able to buy the full range of fares. Naming and shaming paedophiles are warning it could start again if the law isn't changed. And a thrilling century for Lara as the West Indies fight back in the Test. Good evening. Train operators are reviewing the way tickets are sold in a plan which could limit the range of fares on offer at smaller stations. The Association of Train Operating Companies says the proposals only cover tickets like Apex, which have to be bought in advance. The rail regulator says he won't approve anything that's detrimental to passengers.
The train companies want to introduce new high-tech ticket machines, but some stations wouldn't get them. They'd no longer be able to sell advance purchase fares. The companies say there are stations which sell as few as 10 advance tickets a year, and they denied passengers would suffer.
This is about saying, well, these are the stations that will sell a full range of all tickets, and other stations, as is the case now, are serving the needs of passengers who actually want tickets for immediate travel.
The rail firms say passengers are increasingly buying advance tickets over the phone or by other means, and the new machines might not be cost-effective at smaller stations. Some passengers, though, are unhappy.
I think you should be able to get all tickets for all stations, whether they're small or large.
Should give all little villages a better chance to keep the trains and the railway stations.
How many stations might lose the right to sell advance tickets isn't clear. There's speculation it could be several hundred, but the rail regulator says he won't allow any move that's bad for passengers.
Well, any such proposal would require my approval, and I have to say the train operators have made no application to me for such an approval, and I should like to reassure passengers that I have no intention of approving anything which is detrimental to the interests of passengers.
Britain's train operators want to keep costs down, but the regulator is reminding them of their social obligations too. He wants profits and the service to passengers kept in balance. Simon Montague, BBC News.
The government says it will strengthen the law on the treatment of paedophiles in the wake of a campaign to name and shame them, but it won't publish a list of offenders. The News of the World wants controlled public access to the register and has threatened to revive its campaign if the current legislation isn't changed. The Home Office says naming child sex offenders will still be up to the police and the probation service.
Today's message from the paper after the suspension of its name and shame campaign. Inside, it calls for controlled access for the public to information about paedophiles. The family of Sarah Payne at the newspaper offices yesterday interpreted that to mean a public register of child sex offenders. But in an interview this morning, the paper qualified its demands.
If your child went to a nursery and you wanted to be sure that the nursery had checked out its employees properly, then you would be able to ask whether they had done that and check that they had done that.
The paper says if its goals aren't met, it may resurrect its old strategy.
If the government don't come through on what you want, do you start naming and shaming again?
I think we possibly do, yes.
If children face an imminent risk, police do already have the powers to name paedophiles. A review of the law is currently underway and ministers have promised to introduce changes quickly, but they'll resist giving the public automatic access to information.
When it comes to names and addresses, that's a matter that can only be disclosed by the police and the probation service working together, as they are at the moment, doing sterling work in multi-agency panels on the ground.
In America, access to an offender's details is available on the internet, but critics say many of the addresses here are false and the system has seen vigilante attacks escalate. In Britain, riots in Portsmouth last week offered a glimpse at what many fear more public access to the names and addresses of paedophiles might bring.
All weekend, the government has sought to regain control of the issue by stressing that tighter controls on paedophiles are already being considered. There are still real concerns about the nature of the public register being called for, but also worries that unless they act quickly, the naming and shaming could resume. Karen Allen, BBC News at the Home Office.
The Yugoslav army is refusing to grant access to 2 Britons and 2 Canadians arrested 5 days ago on suspicion of spying. British diplomats have demanded a meeting with the men, who are being held in the Montenegrin town of Andrijevica, from where Brian Barron has sent this report.